Hi, welcome everyone. Today we are going to talk to Visu, my buddy, my schoolmate, college mate, and he's a staff engineer at Google. He manages a team of 25 engineers and he works on Firebase. So today I'm going to talk to him. I want to know uh, the day in his life at Google. Uh, and then, I want to talk more about how the hiring process is at Google. And I'm going to end it with a challenge that I want him to solve just to see how an engineer at Google thinks. Okay, with that, Visu, his name is Vishwanathan. My buddies, I call him Visu. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks for the introduction. First, I don't know if I'm going to solve the problem like you mentioned, but I'll give the best shot at what is it to solve the problem at the end. But anyway, so hi everyone, I am Visu. I work at Google. I've been there for the last 10 years. Me and Abhi go a really long way back. We have been buddies from school, college, and then we stayed in touch for a long, long time now. Um, so I was working with a different company before Google, and then I joined Google about like 10 years ago and been significantly focusing on one product, which is Firebase. Firebase has a lot of things underneath, but I'm being leading a few products underneath Firebase. It's been a fun ride. Never looked back at what I did. I'm really happy with where I am. I have a lot of happiness in what I do. I have a lot of challenges in what I do. I have a lot of ways to look forward and around like what are the challenges that's going to be solved in the future.
Awesome. So, Visu, one question I really wanted to ask you for a while, I never did. I thought maybe I'll ask you in a podcast. You and I went to the same school, you and I went to the same college. And then something happened, right? Your career took off like an Nvidia stock. Mine, not so much. And I'm guessing there is some influence, some experience, something that changed, right? Tell me, what was your motivation to go deep dive into engineering and put yourself in a place where you are today?
Yeah, I think two things strikes out to me as to why I made certain decisions towards Google or like towards the prompts I chose to choose. The first one is I want to feel uncomfortable at all points in time. So whatever I did not want to continue doing the same thing. I want to take a different kind of a challenge all the time. If I
Mm,
continuously keep doing the same thing for 1 year, it essentially means I've not evolved. I wanted to keep evolving all the time. The second thing is I want to work on products which are omnipresent. The broader the reach, the broader the scale, the broader the impact it is. So, as an engineer, we have a unique opportunity to multiplicate the kind of impact we could make. So, back in the
okay.
time when I used to make products, it was impacting what I would say few million people. Now, what I do impacts like few billion people. I think that's the
Yeah.
kind of scale I'm evolving towards. And that was always the reason why I wanted to sort of keep evolving from what I'm doing.
Okay. Okay. So, staff engineer, right? Tell me what does a staff engineer do in a day?
Oh, staff engineer are is so Google has a different set of level hierarchies. There are certain levels beyond which Google allows you to be in the same level without getting promoted. Staff is beyond that.
Mm,
So what this
okay.
essentially means is someone, let's say, they join and they start doing small work, and then eventually they start leading, managing product. Sometimes you go beyond managing multiple products. I'm at a phase where there will be multiple products which I lead where I define the engineering path for what that product is going to evolve into. The
Okay.
typical thought process is not about what am I going to do on a daily basis. It's going to be about what this product is going to look 1 or 2 years from now. So essentially, I work with some of those product leaders on a day-to-day basis to figure out, okay, these are the set of users we are currently catering to, and these users are going to need these kind of new requirements eventually in the world. Think of AI as an example. AI, what it solved like a year ago is very, very different when compared to what it's solving today. The kind of things what we are working on is what could AI solve in like, let's say, a year from now or like maybe 2 years from now, and working backwards towards how are you going to accomplish that. So my typical day will involve around working with some of these product leaders, figuring out the path and direction, translating those like futuristic vision into smaller pieces where me and my team can sort of like architect, design what it should be done, and then like solving one step at a time. So most of my work is around translating those like big visions, breaking them into piecemeals, and then like chewing them one at a time in a short span of like, let's say, next 3 months, what are you going to do? How are you going to do? And then like I start defining this to the team so that they could start working on it.
Okay. So a staff engineer at Google who's looking at work that needs to be in at least 2 years ahead of time. So tell me some of the like a major challenge that you had in your life in Google and how do you solve it? The reason I ask is I want myself to learn, plus our audience to know how does the thought process, how does someone at Google at that level is thinking.
Yeah. At Google, at every single level, I think the expectations grow multifold. So what you do as a, let's say, a level 3 engineer versus a level 4 engineer is like at least 10x more. I think same thing, 4, 5, and 6, it keeps like dramatically increasing. So the kind of challenges is going to be very, very different. So the kind of challenges what I commonly see on a day-to-day basis where I'm trying to solve is there are different kinds of challenges. One of them is organizational challenge. One is there are people like product leaders and like the vision leaders who have a very abstract thinking of where things are going to evolve, and turning them into something very tangible is very, very tricky. I think that is where some of my challenges would be. Like someone is talking about, we want to change Google into today is Google is a conglomerate of all the data and then making it available to people. What does this availability mean is a very hard challenge for us to even understand. So my goal is, okay, this availability can be made in terms of a search, or can I make this in terms of a mobile app, or can I make this in terms of a personal assistant? There are multiple ways to do it. My role is about translating it, and this translation is very challenging, where it's a lot around understanding where the market is evolving. Like I want to get a sense of like what the users want, do a lot of user interviews, getting a sense of them into more tangible work. I think that's one challenge. The other challenge is essentially many companies face, Google also face dramatically, is there's a term called imposter syndrome. Basically, the people around you scale up really high. They're all really, really smart people. You have people from like one of the top-notch universities in the world, which also means they also have very strong opinions and perspectives. Trying to work with those opinions and perspectives is never easy. It's never easy. Everyone comes with a very logical rationale behind what they want to do. Just working along with them is like a big deal by itself. Coding is never a challenge. They are really, really good at it. They can easily make it. But handling their opinions and perspectives to make sure like coming up with an alignment is always a huge challenge. So as someone like a staff engineer, my biggest challenge has always been around how do I sort of like come up with that alignment in a room. In a room of 8, there are 8 perspectives, 8 opinions, and it'll be all bifurcated. So it's going to be figuring out how are you going to come up with this medium line. I think that's the biggest challenge. And I'll tell you, though it looks like a challenge, it's so much fun to solve such a challenge. You will be
No.
amazed by so many people are much, much smarter than you in the room. The goal is to be like understand why they're coming from, why they want to do what they want to do, and then coming up with a meaningful alignment around all these ideas. So that is never short of challenges. It's super fun to write.
That's a good point. When you're never the smartest person in the room, so there is some good about that, but there are some challenges too.
Oh, yeah. So each of them have different skills and strengths. It's only about understanding where the strengths are, understanding where your weaknesses, and then see how we can bring it together.
So how do you excel in a company like this where there is everybody around you is smart?
Oh, it's a very
Yeah,
multi-facet.
you manage 25 people, right? 25 engineers. So how does someone, how do you identify someone who has much better capabilities in terms of thinking, problem solving than others? How do you like
Yeah.
that's
So
that's a challenge in itself.
it is a huge challenge. So this is, I would also quickly rewind a bit. When I started the company, my assumption was the quicker I code, the smarter I code, I became great. But I think over a period of time, the experience teaches you a lot more than that. Coding is not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge comes from thinking one step ahead. So
Hmm.
as someone who has like lived in this space for a while, you just have to accept you are not going to be the smartest in the room nowhere, no matter where. The strength always coming from understanding why someone is bringing it up. Communication is an extremely important key. When someone comes to you to say like I want to do this, it's all about they coming up with a rationale around like why they think what they want to do. It's not an instinctive thought. It is a lot of like data driven decision towards why they want to do why they want to do certain things in a certain way. That is a huge differentiator. For someone saying like I like to do this is different from these are the reasonings behind why I think what I should be doing. This is the problem space and this is why I think the solution is going to work. That puts one step ahead. So in many
Yeah.
ways, that gives you a sign towards that this person is not just thinking of a solution. This person is understanding the problem, translating it to what the users are needing, and how are they going to bring a solution. And that gives the edge over someone else who's just coming up with an idea.
Okay.
That is one part. And the other part I also want to bring up is what is your scope of thinking? So when you're like lower in the experience, you're just thinking of how is this model going to work? How is this model going to be used by the user? As you grow up the ladder, you're thinking about how is this going to work as a project or a product or like products. I think the more broader you think, the broader you'll be able to come up with a broader solution. And that is where I think that's a sign for them to grow. And finally, the biggest thing I would say is you have to make decisions. That's the hardest. Coding is the easiest. You have to make decision towards there might be 10 different ways of solving it. This is what I back up with. This is my decision to do that. The more you own decisions and the scale at which you make a decision defines like you are having a better edge over the others.
Now tell me, how does you, like, let's say, introduce a feature or code something and know that it's going to work for like few billion people? It is not going to impact performance. How do you like see that? I mean, how do you, let's say you have three different ways of doing it. How do you know, okay, this is the probably the most optimal way of solving this without impacting our servers, but without impacting performance and stuff like that?
Yeah. Um, the first step towards writing a solution is accepting that the solution might not work. So many
Mm.
a times the decision what you think is always hindsight 2020. The decision is more like we are going this route, we learn. It's okay if we fail. The goal is to accept to fail and then learn and then move forward with it. I think that's the underlying acceptance the team needs to have. Like, for example, when you're trying to define a feature for a product, there could be 5 different ways of doing it. The goal for us is to say, okay, in case if we succeed, this is going to give us a 10x outcome.
Mhm.
And if we're going to fail, that's okay. We learn and then move forward. Whereas there could be another solution which is going to give us just a 2x growth. So at Google, we think of like what is going to give us that 10x. So we think of a solution which gives the 10x. Even if we fail, we learn something, we move forward with it. I think that becomes the biggest rationale behind why we take a decision in certain ways. And the other part is Google also comes up with a lot of experimentation infrastructure right with it. So what that means is like when we launch something, there is enough ways and measures to put in place to get a sense of like how much are people using it, how much are they engaging with it. Is this what we define success to be? And then that allows us to move forward with it or like not depending on when it opens up to the world.
Okay. Now, I want to get into this hiring. I think a lot of students, a lot of folks would definitely want to know. Now, they got to know how about a day in the life of an engineer there or a staff engineer in your case. How does hiring work, right? There are like millions of people who want to like get into Google. They try every AI tool available to them to like build their resume and stuff like that. Tell me, let's start with your interview process. How did you do your interview? What was the question asked to you? I know you've been at Google at 10 years. Talk about your interview experience. Talk about if when you interview folks, what do you look at? And then we'll talk about resume and other
Mm,
stuff.
mm.
So yeah, tell me about your interview experience.
It would be it would be surprising to see if someone was able to make up Google interview at the first shot. So I made the Google's interview attempt like successfully made it at the third attempt. And in all honesty, I felt the first interview I attended with Google was the best interview. Second was like not so great, and third I was absolutely sure I'm not going to get it. But it's totally
Mhm.
the other side about it. So something which I would say is like Google's hiring process has got a lot of checks and balances in place. The hearsay is about less than 0.1% of the resumes are the ones who get picked for the next round. So think
Mm.
of the volume of interviews that goes 1 in 1,000 is where I think they're going to say, okay, this person is going to fit for a job. And from then it is like 1 out of 1,000 is going to get the actual job, which is like 1 in 1,000,000. Okay. So there is a stats which says like in Bay Area alone, everyone has been attending Google interview at least once or twice. So that's the volume of applicants that go through. What
Okay.
makes you stand out or like during the interview is essentially about how confident are you in what you're speaking, and it's not like a more like a bookish run. That's a huge deal. I was interviewed in the context of mobile. I was given solutions around like, let's say you're given so many URLs which are like currently processed. How would you find out if there are any spam URLs versus not? I was not working at Google before. I cannot think in those scales. But I think what I came up with as a solution is I think this is what should work. And this is why I think this is going to work. And I'm absolutely sure my answer was incorrect. But what really stood out was, okay, this person has a plan towards how do you solve this problem. This is how he's going to think that it's going to scale. And the person also understands that these are the gaps in their solution. Once they get that confidence, it gives a lot of confidence that like this person, when they come in, they have the attitude to learn. Because if you're able to solve the problem even before joining Google, probably you'll go build your next Google. When someone is trying to attend Google, the goal is for them to understand how are they able to think, how are they able to go beyond the borders, how are they able to stretch beyond their comfort zone. That's what's being verified.
Okay.
You don't, when for example, you don't have to write the best algorithm out there to solve a problem. You need to have the attitude to go solve the problem. That's the most important part. You should work with the neighboring person to say like, this is what I think, what do you think, give me your ideas, and then we work together to find a solution. So I would say like, don't focus heavily on the algorithm. Think a lot about how are you going to present your solution? How are you going to accept that these are the gaps you have in your solution? And once you have defined, how are you going to validate that the solution is going to work? I think those are the critical aspects for you to account for when you write an interview.
So, how many rounds of interviews do you have now? Do you interview folks
Oh, I do.
currently?
I've been doing this for a
Okay.
while. So back in the time, it used to be 7 rounds.
Mhm.
But now it's gotten reduced. It's like 5 rounds right now. But the good part is there are no more puzzles. Like it's purely engineering and computer science driven.
Okay.
So the actual rounds will differ based on the kind of person they're interviewing with. Sometimes you're into a general path. Sometimes you're into a specialized path. For example, mobile needs a different specialized skill when compared to a general software engineer. Similarly, an AI engineer has a different path when compared to a typical general engineer. So basically, depending on the track you're going, it will be very different. So a typical general software engineer will have about 5 rounds. And these 5 rounds will be into 3 different buckets. I would call them engineer, like development skills. The other one is more about how are you going to work in a team, which is called the Googliness interview. Googliness is meaning like more like behavioral, but like trying to understand like do you fit into the Google culture kind of an interview. And the third bucket falls into the design path. So design is about like how would you design a solution. Like typically not everyone works on a whole big problem, but like even if you're given a problem, how would you think about solving it? So those are the 3 major areas: the coding interview, design interview, and the Googliness interview.
Googliness. Okay. And it doesn't matter which product the engineer is going to work. I mean, it could be Gmail, it could be search.
Yeah.
Does it
Google
matter?
has a different path. That Google has a very different hiring process. So what they do
Okay.
is they don't hire engineers for a product, but rather they hire engineers for the company. Because
Okay.
they also know Google has a very flexible internal policy where you can keep switching teams whenever you want. So they do not want to hire for Gmail alone, or they don't want you to hire only for AI alone. So they want you to have a person who can work in any kind of products as they wish to. So the process is very common. You go through an interview process, you get picked, whatnot, and then there will be a separate matching process where the hiring managers can feel like, oh, this person seems to be good, and I have an open position. I'm going to hire this person to my team. So the interview process is generic. It's very generic.
How would you advise someone who's looking to get into Google in the sense he has an interview call?
Mhm.
How should he prepare for a Google interview?
Got it. So there are 2 processes I want to mention. Like we spoke about 5 rounds. I think those are all in-person round. There is a phone screen prior to that.
Hmm.
So there are 2 phone screens which happen before the in-person call. So what do you prepare for a phone screen is different from what you prepare for in person. That's why I want to differentiate it. So for a phone screen, it's usually about what is your experience, what have you worked on, and expect the questions in the context of what you have worked on. If you're a new college grad, think of what was the recent project you did as a part of your graduation, or could be your internship or whatnot, and then like talk about that in detail. The goal for the interviewer there is essentially about have you been like have you been narrow in what you're working on, or do you have a good context of the whole end-to-end system? So the Google interviewer is going to expect you to think of, I solve this small part of this big system, but I also understand the whole system. So this is what the system was trying to do. This was where the input was flowing in. This is where the output was going in. This is the small part I focused on. and you can actually clarify that. I think that gives a context for the interviewer to say this person is not just narrowed down to one small area. The person knows more end to end. I think that's one thing they look for. So when you go for those phone interviews, be prepared around what did you work on. Be very clear about what is your role. Be very concise about the impact you're going to bring onto the table. It could be the code, it could be performance, it could be anything. So be very clear about that. In addition to that, expect a problem where you are expected to come up with an idea of how would you solve it. More often than not, they would not expect you to code, but they do sometimes do expect you to code as well. Maybe write a small function around it or like give some sort of an idea around it. But the idea is like, how would you able to think of a problem? How would you able to explain that problem and then explain a solution like on a high level? I think that is the goal of the phone screen. As a person who's interviewing, it's important for you to communicate to the interviewer that you have enough context in solving the problem or in solving any problem of sorts. So what do you mean by that is you come up with an idea. You tell me this is, I think this particular algorithm is going to work. A binary search is going to work here. This is how I apply. If I apply that, these are the bottlenecks. These are the challenges I might face. This is how I would validate those challenges are mitigated. Just walking through this path will give enough confidence to the interviewer. You need to make sure you're communicating that very loud and clear to them.
Okay.
When you go to an in-person interview, those 5 rounds, that's a very different process altogether. Like maybe we'll go deeper in a follow-up question. I'll walk you through what should you do in a detailed in-person interview.
Okay. And let's say for a new grad who is probably is going to graduate in like 6 months or a year, what do you look at in his resume or in his work that will, you think, okay, this is not bad. I think we should give him an opportunity to like interview and with us. So what do you look at in a new grad?
This is a very tricky question. I'll tell you why this is tricky. What's required is always future focusing. It's not like what has been done in the past. For example, Google is looking for AI engineers as an example. So sometimes, considering the volume of those applicants, what makes you stand out is those keywords in your resume. Saying like, I worked on AI, I worked on this JavaScript, I worked on this open source library. All these are going to add value. So being on top of what's happening in the ecosystem, at least having some clarity around where things are evolving and having some hands-on experience in that is going to make a huge deal of difference. 5 years ago, let's say a mobile developer like saying like, I have Swift knowledge, I've written this app, here is a sample app in this open source world, will just sort of checkbox you for any mobile role.
Okay.
So similar to that, if you're talking about this is AI, I worked on, let's say MCP, I worked on like this tool, I have worked on that tool with AI, I know how to use cursor. Like those are going to easily check box the hiring manager say, oh, this person seemed to have a lot of context around like where I'm evolving. Okay, I'm going to take him. If you think of past and future, what have we done significantly in the past carries a lot of weightage. Let's say yes, like 60-70%. But where is the future evolving? And like, does this person have some context in that future is going to give you that 30%. And to me, that 30% is the edge. Being on top of what's happening in the ecosystem and having some context there is going to easily get you into the hiring manager's cabin.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Talk about, on-site interview. How scary is that?
It's scary in mind, but honestly, if you think of the interviewers, they're they're trained to be very, very cordial. Their goal is to be working along with you and give you enough space to solve whatever problem it is. But anyway,
Just
so
bring
let's
down
talk
the
about
nerves for the candidate. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the initial few minutes, still like when someone gets into the Google interview, there's a lot of nervousness going in. Trust me, if I go out of Google and if I come back to an interview at Google, I will be nervous. Like no matter what, I'll definitely be nervous, right? So it's not just the skill, it's the mental preparation. So at Google, there will be like 3 kinds of interviews, like I mentioned. There's coding, that is design, and the Googliness. Sometimes coding, you'll call it the trickiest, but I would say coding is the easiest. So I'll tell you why the coding is easiest, because you are going to showcase what you have learned, right? So that way it's relatively easy. It's more
I'm
like a
not sure how many
solution.
people are going to agree with you on that, but yeah, go ahead.
So the reason I say coding is relatively easy is they don't look for accuracy in your solution. They are looking for your approach in the solution. I think that is where it becomes easier. You might be completely getting the wrong algorithm, but as long as you know what you're speaking, you know how to implement that, it's great. Obviously, they're going to look for the most optimal solution. They're going to expect you to do those optimal solutions, but coming up with at least one solution which works is going to unblock a lot of things for you. We talk about greedy algorithm, dynamic algorithm. We spoke about a lot of those things. Having one good working solution showcases that you have someone who can translate a problem into a solution. Optimize for that. And once you get around that, you can always be ahead of time to say, I have a solution. I know it's not optimal, but this is one solution which is going to work. Now, once I have this solution in place, I will figure out if there is a way to optimize it better. And that sort of aligns between you and the interviewer to say, like, okay, this person is going to take time to implement a solution. He has got his coding skills in place. He has got his algorithmic thinking skills in space, and they are able to translate it into something that's demonstrable. Once that you're checkboxing, you're actually checkboxing 80% of the needs for a coding interview.
Okay.
The rest 20% is about optimizing and testing. So at a problem like at Google, like a scale comes significantly high in how am I going to keep evolving with predictability. So testing is extremely important. So even if you don't have a great working solution, if you have a good testing framework that already checkboxes you for a lot of things for Google. A lot of people think heavily about just writing a solution. What I would say is think about solution. Yes, you need 50% of your time on solution, but at least the next out of the next 50, 25% should be focusing on testing. A lot of people miss out on the testing part. Just showcasing that I can validate what I've written, checkboxes a lot of things for you. So that is one. And the second part is you have to be comfortable in coding. Good or bad, you have about 45 minutes to demonstrate that you know to code. So you cannot spend a lot of time on recollecting your syntax, recollecting what is the best way to start a problem and write a solution. You have to see if there are ways to sort of checkbox them out much sooner. An example could be, I'm going to forget everything. I'm going to write only this particular function. Just give it a function name, good a set of parameters, and then write everything inside it. That is sufficient to solve because they're not going to run your program and test all of those things. Their goal is to say, can this person write? So defining a function, putting the right syntax there is already going to give a lot of confidence to the interviewer.
Okay.
Something which I also want to add is like interviewer is not going to look for um, just the ideal solution. They also are very open for brainstorming solutions. You should be talking along with them to say what you're thinking. If you're taking your time to just think, and write some piece of code, the interviewer has no idea about what's in your mind. So you should use the interviewer, like the person who's interviewing you, as your brainstormer. I think this is what I'm going to do. I feel this is not ideal, but I still want to try out. This dynamic algorithm might work in the scenario, but I couldn't come up with a better solution. For now, I'm just going to stick on to it. All these kind of words give a lot of signal back to the interviewer saying, okay, this person is thinking. I'm traveling along with them. I'm not completely aloof out of it, right? And in the coding interview, at least dedicate 10 to 12, maybe at least 10 minutes, dedicate towards explaining your code. Do not assume that the interviewer is going to understand your code. Even it could be obvious, but just make sure you write your code 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 10 minutes to explain, 10 minutes to write tests for it, and then talk about what are the set of things you could do to improve the performance or like have an ideal solution.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I have to summarize,
Mhm.
code, test, communicate, and explain your code.
Yes, totally there. Yeah.
Okay.
Next comes the design interview. So design interview is where I think a lot of people, in my opinion, struggle a bit because
Mhm.
Google's strength does not come from writing solutions. It comes from solutions that scale. So design is where I think a lot of people need to think always Google scale. Just as
Okay.
an example, the product I'm working on, Firebase, a product which is used by, let's say, 1 million developers in the world. And these million developers will give those applications to the end users who are using it. And about, let's say, each developer has about 1 million users. So now I'm talking about 1 billion devices out there already. 1 billion instance of apps using it. So every solution you create needs to have that billion scale in your mind. Like you're not writing for like 100 people or 1,000 people or like 100,000 people. You're talking about like volumes and volumes, right? So design talks about, okay, now when I'm trying to write a solution, I'm not going to assume that these users are going to access the application from Bay Area alone. I'm going to access across the world. So which comes down to what does it to mean to have a distributed solution? Which means what is it to have enough caching in space where it could be very fast? What does it mean to be having a very quick lookup? So back are the days where we'll actually go through an array list, linked list and whatnot. Now we're looking for like order of one solutions. Think of the search that's happening in like fraction of a second. So if you have to scale to that, what does it to mean to have a very optimal solution? So think of, there are a few things which always check boxes to design interview. You should have some sort of caching mechanism. You should have something called an order of one lookup, which means you need to have a key value lookup. So that's something that's required. You should geographically separate, like a distributed solution. You need to have a place where it's not like one location where the solution is going to be served. It's going to be spread across multiple places, which means syncing data across all these places is going to be the third part. And the fourth part, which will also come in, is for an end user, what is the easiest we can do to reach to them? Example, I don't know how many people know this. Let's say when you have a weather app, the goal is you should be able to get whatever you want in 3 clicks. Anything beyond 3 clicks, users are going to be like off their mind. They're going to be like disengaged. Similarly, when you're on a web, the lesser number of clicks, the lesser information for them to type, it's going to work. So this also comes with an inherent challenge. If lesser they type, that's a lot for you to self-infer by yourself. So as a design solution maker, you have to think about, okay, what is the minimum can I get from the users to understand the most myself? I think that is going to be something which you should be able to think of it as well.
Okay.
Those are the ways to easily scale and manage. That is also the other part which comes when we were so tuned to SQL kind of thought process for database lookups. Those days are gone now. So what can I do for like these modern day MongoDBs of world where like it's order of one, quick lookup, very fast to serve, no SQL solutions. Like having those handy in your mind is going to be very, very helpful.
Okay.
Just as a prep work, I would suggest take some random lead code problems. Like forget easy, medium, hard, or whatnot. Don't worry about that. Just pick one. Think of how do I write a solution? How do I think of a solution for this design problem? And think of, will this scale for my town? Will this scale for my state? Will this scale for this country? Will this scale for the whole world? Like that is how you slowly keep asking questions more and more and more and more, and then eventually get to a solution which is much more scalable. With AI, it's
Brilliant.
much easier, right? Solution. Ask, is this going to scale? It's going to say, no, use this and use that. Like that way you can keep fine-tuning your thought process.
So summarize caching, order of one, distributed solution, which is kind of scaling, right?
Right.
And minimal work from the end
End user.
customer or consumer. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All right. It's anything else we want to talk about before we get into our problem solving, the fun part?
Oh, real quick, the last one I'll touch before we get into the actual problem. So I'll say like
Yeah.
Googliness is an important part of interview as well. Googliness interview where they
Google.
think of how would this person fit into the team culture, right? So there are a few things which Google really cares about. You can always build the next shiny product. That is also a part like where the existing products which have to be maintained. Your skill is always about doing both. It is not one or the other. Like you should be ready to take what is grunge work is also that is a part of your regular skill. You should understand like what does it mean to maintain the current work? What is it to keep thinking the next shiny solution? I think that's something they definitely look for. Like you should be open for doing those. It's not going to be 100% of your time, but you should be prepared to take that kind of work if required. And the second one is what is it to like the initial thing I mentioned, being in a room with 8 smart people. You cannot have your attitude go in front of you. You should have a data-driven solution which go in front of you. Like that is also a part they definitely check for. And they also look for like the whole completeness in terms of your role. You are not just a coder. You are the entrepreneur for yourself. You are like going to take care of what is it to develop, what is it to maintain, what is it to test, what is it to launch, what is it to relaunch and whatnot. So it should be a part of all of them as well. So that's a part of Googliness interview.
Googliness. Okay.
Never forget to ask questions back to the interviewer. Like you should have a clear set of 2 or 3 questions to ask them. Don't worry about what you're going to ask. It could be anything. What do you hate about Google? What do you not want? Like, why are you still sitting at Google? Like, all these are fair questions, but just to ask them. The more you ask, the more you engage with them to understand what's happening at Google.
Okay. Googliness. Always ask questions. Fit
Yes,
culture.
always
Fit,
ask questions. Yes.
Try to be the most lovable guy in the team, right?
Yes.
Let's get to the challenge. Let's see.
Yes.
Let's see if you're all talk or you really work at Google. I'm going to like test your thought
Like
process.
I mentioned, I don't think I'll clear my interview if I do it again. But anyways.
No, what I'm looking for, just like you said, Google interviewer, I'm not looking for a solution. I'm looking for a thought process. And personally, I'm just looking to like, for the audience to know how you think, how people at Google think. So let's do one thing. Let's do a very simple.
How do I pick? How is it if I pick a problem?
No.
A very real user problem.
No. Okay, you pick one. Let's do it.
So there is one
So
common thing which you would all have seen as a common user. Let's say you go to Google Maps, you do a Google
mhm,
search. Let's say you search for a restaurant, and right as a part of the result, there is a small symbol which says share, and you
mhm,
click on it, it gives you a short link. So if you
mhm,
look at the link, it will be very small. Just say like g.co/ and then there'll be some random
yeah.
set of characters. So let's take a problem to say, given a particular URL, how do you shorten it so that you can share that with people? That's it. The problem statement is that.
Okay.
And this is not just applicable only for Google Maps or Google Search. Think of even YouTube, for example. YouTube also has the same shortcut link. Like any place, even for reviews, everything has this shortcut, right? So let's think of how do you build a solution which could be applicable across any product at Google, where the goal is to shorten the URL from big one to small one. To be clear, this question is a very outdated question. This is not used anymore, but my goal is to walk through the process of like, what is it to think of a solution for this?
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds
So
good.
now, as someone who's attending an interview who wants to take this problem and then try to solve it, the first thing I need to do is I need to clarify. So my goal is, okay, I'm creating the shortcut for all of these. Do we have a limit on the number of short URLs I need to generate? Meaning, like, is it going to be scaling only for 10 million, 1 billion, 10 billion, or like whatnot? Let's
Okay.
assume for all users' sake, we are expecting like this to be a 100 billion solution. Let's say the interviewer says, like, we want to solve this
URLs.
for
Okay.
100 billion short URLs. The second question I will ask is, um, now, if we have 100 billion, how long should we retain these URLs? Is it going to be retained for 1 year, 10 years, forever? Because forever also has a cost around it, but I'm just curious to understand what it means. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's say the interviewer comes back saying it's going to be forever. Okay. Now, what are the signals I've got? I'm just saying this is going to be huge scale. And I also want to have this to be working forever, right? So it's going to be like, it has to be retained forever. So now what I would do is like, what are the factors they'll account for? Something for me to think of is what can scale really well here? The short URL should be a factor of the day of the month or like the day of the year. And then it should also have a sense of timestamp. It should also have a sense of like who is actually generating the URL, some sort of. So these are the factors which give you that shortened URL thing. So think of on this date, which is December 10th, for example, at like 8 p.m. And then I'm going to translate this into some sort of a timestamp, followed by user ID. Let's say I'm trying to create a hexadecimal out of it, and that becomes like a beautiful short URL.
So are
Okay.
you talking about the problem now, the solution? Are you still
This solution, how
talking
do you
about?
think of a
Okay.
solution? I'm not even getting to a solution. So think
Okay.
what can enable me to scale? It is only going to be something like this. The timestamp will be a good factor into it. So that can actually give me the uniqueness, but I can also like scale forever. I think that becomes easier.
Is there any other requirements for that? Like we said, there should be a max length for that URL, right? Does that, like you already mentioned, how the number of URLs, right? You said
Mhm.
100 billion. What else is the like a requirement for such a short URL? Is that it?
You can think more. Like as a clarifying question, you can ask a lot more. For example, how do we account for uniqueness in URLs across different domains? Should those be unique?
Mm,
Like an URL generated from Google review, should that be different from a URL generated from YouTube? Because the prefix is different, can it be the same? Can I reuse them? Like that's another
mm.
clarifying question if you want to. And then the other one to ask is like, do you expect this URL to be different across different countries? That's also a possibility where, like, for example, someone creating a shortcut in US, can they access this from, like, let's say, a European country? Like, other
Okay.
limitations or restrictions around it? Like, those kind of things can be
Okay.
asked.
Yeah. I think for the interview sake, yeah, we'll just
Yeah.
limit it to just
I'm
two
trying to
or
keep it
three,
into
right?
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, when you think what can enable you to scale, you need to have the easiest way to bring that uniqueness. To me, it's timestamp. A combination of your timestamp, your user ID, and probably the product you're working on. A combination of that is going to give a unique URL, which is applicable for that particular product, which can keep scaling. Also, like you should also think of these, what are the kind of characters that are allowed in the URL could be a good clarifying question. Can
Yeah.
I use a semicolon there?
Security. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, can I use an ampersand there? Like all those things are possible. For ease of sake, let's say it's going to allow me only all the digits 0 to
Mhm.
9 and then like uppercase, lowercase, and then like underscore, dash, and whatnot. Just
Okay.
within these combinations, if you try the permutations and combinations, you will have about easily 140 billion unique URLs, which are about like 12 characters in length. So which essentially talks about you are already creating a solution for like 140 billion URLs. Just perfect. I think that's exactly what we want.
Mhm.
So now let's try to figure out, given a URL, how are you going to generate the short URL? What can be very fast in generating the solution? You don't have to think of doing some sort of encoding. It could be very simple key value mapping. Generate a random combination of these 12 characters and then create a small key value store. the key being the shortened URL and the value being the long URL. That is good enough for you. So you don't have to think more. So that becomes there are so many key values. The spanner is a great open source key value solution. You can start using those kind of solutions to solve it.
Okay.
Now comes the lookup. How am I going to distribute my data across multiple locations? So now I'm going to say, like, I'm going to have an instance of my database in different parts of the world. Like, let's say there's one for the east coast of US, one for the west coast of US, one somewhere in the central part, and one in Europe. Like, we can talk about some of these as like possible places. Now I should think of what are those bridging solutions where I can keep these databases in sync. There are so many techniques where you can actually sort of say, like, I write it here. There is going to be a background daemon always checking for what are the new updates in the last n number of seconds, and then like quickly replicate the data to other data sources and whatnot. Talking about those gives you this extra cookies for, okay, this person has solved this, thinking about the distributed solution and whatnot.
Okay.
Now, what did we come across? We took a problem, we clarified few information there, like we spoke about what are the restrictions and whatnot. That's the first step. And then next we went about saying, okay, what is going to scale? We came up with like what possible characters we can have in the shortened URL. And then we turned that into a database of like shortened URL to the long URL. And then we spoke about the distributed mechanism. So now already an interviewer would have got a sense of, oh, this person knows how to break a problem. This person knows how to write a solution. This person has like come up with a scalable solution and whatnot. The last part is how do you test it? So now we should talk about how do you validate that this is actually unique enough? Maybe you can create a small hermetic testing where you generate 1,000 URLs, give 1,000 URLs, generate 1,000 shortened URLs in a short span of time with, let's say, what is the latency and whatnot, test for it, and then do a lookup to say if there is no ambiguity or not. That is going to give you that extra tidbit to say, okay, this person is also testing it. So now what I gave as a solution might not be the ideal one, but I was able to come up with a solution which works, at least in my mind. I'm able to explain this to the interviewer, and I also have a testing process behind it. So that already gives me like a very good edge around like writing a solution for Google.
Now, in this solution, let's say I give a URL today and it gives me a shortened URL. I give the same URL tomorrow, it will give me a different URL because you're using
Yes.
timestamp
Yes. Yes.
in there. Okay.
But you know what? This is also a great question. So this could be a good clarifying question to ask. If I provide the same URL on a different day, is it okay to reuse the same shortened URL or should it be a new one? You can ask
Yeah.
that
We can
question.
always check if that it's already
Right.
in there.
But I'll give you an already easy answer for Google. Google doesn't care about it because we are looking at scale here. The cost of checking if the long URL is already in a huge database is very expensive. So they would rather say, it's okay, create a new URL. I don't care about it. Because that's how things will work. Internally, you can map them to be the same eventually, but like they don't care about it. I think for me, just clarifying this already gives you a good edge. And like coming up with
Okay.
that shows like you're thinking beyond your regular problem statement, which is great.
Okay. All right. I think we are close to wrapping this up. It was great talking to you. I think I'm going to have another session with you pretty soon. I want to like dig a little more deeper into how a Googler thinks, a little more on the interview process and more. I think
Mm-hmm.
our audience would love that. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll come back with another challenging question for you. This time I'm going to like dictate the question for you.
Totally happy to do that. So the one thing as a parting thought I want to say for anyone who wants to attend an interview at Google, the first thing I would say is like, don't worry about the outcome. Take that as something to express yourself. That is the first step. A lot of it is not your technical preparation, it's your mental preparation. Like mentally being prepared to say, this is what I know, this is how best I can showcase is all that needs. You might not get it the first time or assume it's going to be hard to get the first time, but if you get it, great. But the goal is give the best at what you can do. And Google always has open doors for taking people with like great thought process. So thought is more important, mental process is more important than your technical skills. So good luck with the
Great.
next interview process soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think I've grown smarter in the last 30, 40 minutes. So I appreciate that. I think our audience would appreciate that too. And I will be back with talking to you
And
again sometime soon with more challenging questions.
my interview hands are ready then. Like, so I'm looking forward to attending an interview from you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks
Thank you.
again. Thanks for taking time to talk to me.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.